The stars have been watching Earth for a very long time. Hidden among the rocks that floated between Mars and Jupiter, 12 alien ships waited and watched. They had been there for thousands of years, watching humans grow from cave dwellers to builders of cities. They watched humans discover fire, invent the wheel, and eventually reach for the sky with rockets. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Consortium. They were old, much older than humans. Their technology was so advanced that they could hide entire fleets of ships behind invisible shields. They could travel between stars in the blink of an eye. They had weapons that could destroy whole planets if they wanted to, but they did not use these weapons carelessly. The consortium believed they were the guardians of the galaxy. They watched younger species grow and develop. They decided which ones were worthy of joining them among the stars, and which ones were too dangerous to be allowed to leave their homeworlds. For 3,000 years they had watched humanity. They saw every war humans fought, they recorded. Every act of cruelty, every moment of violence, every time humans hurt each other. The alien watchers kept detailed files on human behavior. Wars between tribes, wars between nations, wars that killed millions of people. They watched humans drop nuclear bombs on their own cities. They saw humans poison their rivers and fill their air with smoke. The year 2157 was when the consortium finally made their decision about humanity. World War III had been raging for 5 years. Nuclear weapons fell from the sky like deadly rain. The great cities of Earth burned with radioactive fire. New York was a crater of glowing glass. London was buried under toxic ash. Tokyo had simply vanished in a flash of atomic light. Billions of people died in the first few months of the war. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in what remained of the Australian Space Centre, watching the news feeds from around the world. She was one of the few scientists still alive who studied alien life. The irony was not lost on her that she spent her career looking for aliens among the stars, while her own species destroyed itself on Earth. The communication screen in front of her showed the latest casualty reports. Over 4 billion people were dead. The oceans glowed with radiation. Most of the world's forests were burning or already turned to ash. Humanity was killing itself, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. Dr. Chun, her assistant called from across the room. We're getting some strange readings from the orbital sensors. Sarah looked up from the terrible numbers on her screen. What kind of readings? Large objects moving in from the asteroid belt. They're huge, but they're not showing up clearly on our scans. It's like they're partially invisible. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. After years of searching for signs of alien life, the timing seemed too perfect to be a coincidence. How many objects? At least 12, maybe more. They're definitely artificial. Nothing in nature moves in those kinds of formations. Sarah ran to the sensor station and looked at the data herself. The readings were faint, but there was no doubt about it. Ships were approaching Earth. Alien ships. They're coming to help us, Sarah whispered. They must have been watching the war. They're coming to stop us from destroying ourselves. But Sarah was wrong. The alien ships took position high above Earth, far beyond the reach of human weapons. They did not try to contact world leaders. They did not offer to stop the war. They did not come to save humanity from itself. Instead, they waited. The first human settlement on Mars had been built just 2 years before the war started. 300 brave colonists lived there, growing food in underground gardens and mining water from the polar ice caps. They watched the war on Earth through video feeds and felt helpless to stop the destruction of their homeworld. The space elevator that connected Earth to the moon-based manufacturing stations was humanity's greatest achievement. It was a thin cable stretching from the equator all the way to Luna, allowing cheap transport of materials and people between the two worlds. Millions of tons of supplies moved along that cable every day. The alien ships destroyed it first. The weapons they used made no sound in the vacuum of space, but they lit up the sky like artificial lightning. The space elevator simply disappeared, cut into pieces that fell toward Earth like burning meteors. The pieces that hit the planet's surface created new craters and lands already scarred by nuclear war. Next, they destroyed the orbital manufacturing platforms. These giant factories floated in space around Earth, building everything from computer chips to spacecraft. The aliens turned them into clouds of glowing metal and plastic that slowly fell toward the planet's atmosphere, the human colony. Ships that were still under construction in the shipyards near the moon were the next targets. Humanity had been planning to send these ships to nearby star systems, carrying seeds and genetic samples to plant human life on other worlds. The alien weapons turned the ships into scrap metal before they could ever leave Earth's solar system. On Mars, the colonists watched in horror as their supply ships from Earth were destroyed one by one. Without regular deliveries of food, medicine, and equipment, they knew they would die slowly on the red planet. Dr. Chun managed to establish contact with the alien fleet using the last working communication satellite. The response she received was brief and cold. "Your species has proven itself unworthy of the cosmos," the alien voice said through the speakers. The translation software made the words sound flat and emotionless. "You have shown that you cannot live in peace even among your own kind. You poison your world and kill your own people without thought for the future. Such a species cannot be allowed to spread to other worlds." "Please," Sarah spoke into the microphone with tears in her eyes, "we can change. We can learn to be better. Don't condemn us all for the mistakes of our leaders." "Your leaders are chosen by your people," the alien voice replied. "Your wars are fought by your people. Your weapons are built by your people. This is not the fault of a few individuals. This is the nature of your entire species." "We have children who have never hurt anyone," Sarah pleaded. "We have scientists and artists and teachers who only want to make the world better. Don't let them die for the crimes of others." But the alien voice was unmoved. "Those same children will grow up to become warriors. Your artists will create propaganda for war. Your teachers will train the next generation of killers. We have watched you for 3,000 years. This is what you are." The communication ended. The aliens destroyed the last satellite, cutting off Earth's connection to its colonies on Mars and the Moon. Then they simply left, returning to wherever they had come from among the stars. Sarah Shun stood alone in the ruins of the Space Center, surrounded by the ashes of human civilization. The aliens had not destroyed Earth directly. They had done something much more cruel. They had destroyed humanity's future. They had trapped the species on their dying world and forced them to face the consequences of their violence alone. As the radioactive winds blew through the broken windows, Sarah made a promise to herself and to every human who would come after her. Somehow, someday, humanity would prove the aliens wrong. They would find a way to reach the stars again, and when they did, the consortium would pay for their judgment. 300 years had passed since the aliens destroyed humanity's hope of reaching the stars. The Earth that emerged from the nuclear winter was a very different world than the one the consortium had condemned. The surface was still dangerous. Radiation poisoned large areas of land where the great cities once stood. Storms of toxic dust swept across the empty plains where millions of people used to live. The oceans glowed with a sickly green light in some places, and fish with strange mutations swam in the deeper waters, but humanity had not died as the aliens expected. They had gone underground deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in North America. A city called New Denver stretched for miles through carved stone tunnels. 10 million people lived there, breathing filtered air and eating food grown under artificial lights. The city had libraries full of books about the old world, workshops where craftsmen built tools and machines, and schools where children learned. About the day the aliens came, Marcus Reeves walked through the main tunnel of New Denver, heading toward the council meeting. He was tall and thin, with gray eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. His great-great-grandmother had been one of the few people who survived the destruction of the original Denver. She had told stories to her children about the day the sky filled with alien ships, and those stories had been passed down through 5 generations. Marcus wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Resistance Council. On his chest was a patch showing Earth surrounded by stars with the words "Never Forget, Never Forgive" written underneath. Every member of the Resistance wore that patch. It reminded them why they worked so hard, why they lived in the darkness underground, why they planned and prepared for something that might not happen for decades or even centuries. The Council chamber was carved from solid rock, with a long table in the center where the 12 elected leaders of New Denver made their decisions. Similar councils existed in the other underground cities: New London beneath the English Channel, New Tokyo in the depths of an old mine in Japan, New Moscow under the Siberian ice. All of them were connected by secret communication networks that the aliens could not detect. "The reports from the other cities are encouraging," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of the science division. She was a small woman with dark hair and quick, intelligent eyes. "New Beijing has successfully tested their new fusion reactor. The power output is 3 times what we expected. New Cairo has completed work on the atmospheric processors. They can clean the air in a sealed environment and make it safe to breathe." "What about the space program?" Marcus asked. That was always his first question at these meetings. For 3 centuries, humans had been working toward one goal: getting back to the stars, getting revenge on the aliens who had condemned them. "We have made real progress," Elena said with a smile. "The Prometheus project has completed Phase 1. We now understand how the alien ships were able to hide from our sensors. They use something called quantum displacement fields. The ships exist slightly outside normal space, which makes them almost invisible to most detection methods." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "Almost invisible. But not completely?" "Correct. We found a way to detect the displacement fields using modified gravitational sensors. It took us 50 years to figure out how to build the sensors, and another 50 years to make them work properly. But now we can see the aliens coming, even when they are trying to hide." That was important news. For generations, humans had been terrified that the aliens might return to finish what they started. Every underground city had escape tunnels and emergency plans in case alien ships appeared in the sky again. Now, for the first time, they would have warning. "And there is more," Elena continued. "We have also learned how to create our own displacement fields. Our ships will be able to hide just like the alien ships do. We can build a fleet and keep it secret until we are ready to strike." The other council members nodded with approval. They had all grown up hearing stories about the day humanity was judged and found wanting. They had all dreamed of the day when humans would return to space and make the aliens pay for their cruelty. "How long until we can build our first starship?" asked Commander Sarah Blake, the head of the military division. She was Marcus's cousin, and she had the same gray eyes that seemed to burn with anger. "At least 20 more years for a prototype," Elena replied. "Maybe 30 years before we can build a ship capable of traveling to other star systems. The technology is extremely complex. We are essentially trying to build machines that are centuries ahead of what humans had before the war." "Too long," Marcus said, shaking his head. "The aliens might discover us before then. They might decide to check on Earth and find out that we are still alive." "That is unlikely," Elena said. "We have been monitoring space around Earth for decades. No alien ships have come back to check on us. They probably think we died out long ago, just like they planned." In the deepest part of New Denver, far below the council chambers and the living areas, was the archive. This was where humanity stored everything they knew about the aliens, every piece of wreckage from the destroyed space stations, every recording of alien communications, every photograph of alien ships, every detail about the day the judgment came. The archive was run by an old man named Professor Chun. He was the great-grandson of Dr. Sarah Chun, the scientist who had tried to plead with the aliens 3 centuries ago. Professor Chun had spent his entire life studying the enemy. He knew more about alien technology than any other human alive. Late at night, when the rest of the city was sleeping, Professor Chun would walk through the archive and look at the displays. Models of alien ships hung from the ceiling. Computer screens showed diagrams of alien weapons. File cabinets contained thousands of pages of analysis and research. But the most important item in the archive was a simple audio recording. It was the last transmission from the alien fleet, the message that Dr. Sarah Chun had received just before they destroyed the final communication satellite. "Your species has proven itself unworthy of the cosmos," the alien voice said through the old speakers. "Remain on your world and face the consequences of your nature." Professor Chun played that recording every night before he went to sleep. He wanted to remember the cold, arrogant tone of the alien voice. He wanted to remember how they had dismissed humanity as worthless. He wanted to feel the anger that had driven his people for 300 years. Tomorrow he would continue his work. He would study the alien technology and look for weaknesses. He would help Elena Vasquez and her team build the ships that would carry humanity back to the stars. He would do everything in his power to make sure that when humans finally met the aliens again, the outcome would be very different. In cities beneath the earth, in tunnels carved from stone and ice, humanity was changing. The descendants of the survivors were harder than their ancestors. They were more focused, more determined, more willing to do whatever was necessary to achieve their goals. The aliens had tried to teach them a lesson about the consequences of violence. Instead, they had created something much more dangerous. They had created a species that lived for revenge. Children in the underground schools learned mathematics and science, but they also learned about the ships that had hung in Earth's sky and condemned their entire species. They learned about the colonies that had been abandoned to die. They learned about the dreams that had been destroyed and the future that had been stolen. And they learned that someday, when humans were strong enough and smart enough and angry enough, they would return to space. They would find the aliens who had judged them, and they would show the consortium what humanity was truly capable of when they had a reason to fight. The aliens had watched humanity fall, but they had not stayed to watch them rise. That had been their mistake. And someday, it would cost them everything. 25 years had passed since the council meeting in New Denver. The underground cities had grown larger and more advanced. But more importantly, humanity had finally built their first starships. Admiral Sarah Chun Nakamura stood on the bridge of the warship Vengeance, looking out at the fleet that surrounded her. 12 ships hung in the darkness of space beyond the moon, invisible to any watching eyes. Each ship was painted black and built for only one purpose. War. Sarah was the great-granddaughter of Dr. Sarah Chun, the scientist who had tried to reason with the aliens centuries ago. But unlike her ancestor, Sarah had no interest in talking to the enemy. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. The moment when humanity would begin to take its revenge. The ships of the human fleet looked nothing like the graceful vessels that other species built. There were no smooth curves or artistic designs. The human ships were angular and sharp, like giant knives floating in space. Every surface was covered with weapons. Missile launchers, plasma cannons, railguns that could fire metal slugs at incredible speeds. These ships had been designed by people who understood that space was not a place for beauty. It was a place for killing. "Admiral," said Commander Torres from the navigation station, "we are approaching the target system. The Zerithi monitoring station should be visible on our screens in 30 seconds. Sarah nodded and activated the communication system that connected her to the other ships in the fleet. "All vessels, this is Admiral Shun Nakamura. Today we begin to collect the debt that Galaxy owes us. Today we show the aliens what happens when you condemn an entire species to die on their own world." The target was a space station orbiting a small planet in the Kepler 442 system. For over 300 years, this station had been watching Earth from a distance. The Zerithi aliens who ran the station had been part of the consortium that condemned humanity. They had voted to destroy human space infrastructure and leave the species to die. Now it was time for them to pay. The Zerithi were tall, thin aliens with skin that looked like blue crystal. They were proud of their military strength and their advanced technology. Their ships were fast and elegant, with energy shields that could stop most weapons. For thousands of years, no enemy had been able to defeat them in battle, but the Zirathi had never fought humans before. "Contact," reported the sensor officer. "I have the station on the screens. It's exactly where our intelligence said it would be. Large structure, maybe 50,000 Zirathi living and working there." Sarah looked at the image on the main screen. The alien station was beautiful in its own way, with gleaming towers that caught the light from the nearby star. It looked peaceful. Safe. The Zirathi probably thought they were too far from Earth for humans to ever reach them. They were wrong. "All ships, engage stealth systems," Sarah ordered. "Take us to attack position." The human ships seemed to fade away as their quantum displacement fields activated. They became ghosts in space, invisible to the Zirathi sensors. The aliens had taught humanity how to hide by watching their own ships 3 centuries ago. Now, that knowledge would be used against them on the monitoring station. Commander Zethka was reviewing the daily reports from his subordinates. The Zirathi officer was tall even by the standards of his species, with crystal skin that glowed with a soft blue light. He had been stationed here for 20 years, watching the dead world that the humans had once called home. It was boring work. Earth showed no signs of life beyond some bacteria and small animals. The great cities were still radioactive ruins. The oceans were still poisoned. As far as Zethka could tell, the human species had gone extinct decades ago, just as the consortium had planned. "Commander," said one of his junior officers, "I am detecting some unusual gravitational readings from the outer system. Very faint. But the pattern is strange." Zethka looked at the data on his screen. The readings were so weak that they were barely visible above the background noise. "Probably just asteroids or space debris. File a report and continue monitoring." The junior officer nodded and returned to his work. Neither of them realized that the gravitational readings were being caused by 12 human warships moving into attack position around their station. Sarah Chun Nakamura waited until all her ships were in place. The human fleet had surrounded the Zirathi station like wolves surrounding prey. Each ship had targeted a different section of the station with their weapons. When the attack began, it would be swift and overwhelming. "All ships report ready," Commander Torres announced. Sarah took a deep breath. For 3 centuries, her people had dreamed of this moment. The moment when humanity would strike back at the aliens who had condemned them. She thought about her ancestor, Dr. Sarah Chun, who had begged the aliens for mercy and been ignored. She thought about all the humans who had died on poisoned Earth while the aliens watched from a safe distance. "Open a channel to the station," Sarah ordered. The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Sarah's face appeared on screens throughout the Zirathi monitoring station. The aliens stared in shock at the impossible sight. A human, alive in space, talking to them from somewhere nearby. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun Nakamura of the Terran Fleet," she said in a cold, clear voice. 300 years ago, your species and your allies in the consortium condemned humanity to die on our poisoned world. You watched us fall and did nothing to help. You decided that we were too violent, too dangerous to be allowed among the stars." Commander Zethka stood frozen at his command station, staring at the human face on his screen. This was impossible. Humans were extinct. Their technology had been destroyed. How could they be here? "You made a mistake," Sarah continued. "You thought that destroying our ships and our space stations would be enough to stop us. You thought that leaving us to die slowly would teach us a lesson about violence, but you were wrong. You did not teach us to be peaceful, you taught us to hate." Around the station, the human ships became visible as they dropped their stealth fields. The Zirathi officers cried out in alarm as 12 warships materialized from empty space, their weapons already aimed and ready to fire. "Today you will learn what real violence looks like," Sarah said. "Today you will understand why the galaxy should have feared us from the beginning. This is for Earth. This is for every human child who died because of your judgment. This is the beginning of our revenge." The human ships opened fire. The weapons they used were unlike anything the Zirathi had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the humans fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. These kinetic weapons hit with the force of small meteors, smashing through the station's energy shields like they were made of paper. The beautiful crystal towers of the monitoring station shattered under the impact. Sections of the structure broke away and tumbled into space, leaking air and alien bodies. Zirathi tried to return fire with their own weapons, but the human ships were too fast and too well armored. Commander Zethka watched in horror as his station was torn apart around him. Emergency alarms blared throughout the facility. Reports came in from all sections. Hull breaches on levels 12 through 15. Power failures in the main reactor, weapon systems offline. Life support failing. Send a distress signal to the consortium, Zethka ordered. Tell them that humans are alive. Tell them that they have ships and weapons. But before the message could be sent, a human kinetic projectile struck the communication array. The massive metal slug, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, turned the entire communication section into a cloud of glowing debris. The attack lasted only 15 minutes. When it was over, the Zirathi monitoring station was a broken wreck floating dead in space. A few escape pods had managed to launch, carrying survivors away from the destruction. Sarah had allowed them to escape on purpose. She wanted witnesses. She wanted the galaxy to know that humanity had returned. As the human fleet prepared to leave, Sarah opened one final communication channel to the escape pods. Return to your consortium, she told the surviving Zirathi. Tell them that the species they condemned is very much alive. Tell them that we have not forgotten their judgment. Tell them that we are coming for all of them, one world at a time. The escape pods fled toward the nearest consortium outpost, carrying news that would shake the galaxy. Humanity was back. And they were not the same species that had been condemned 3 centuries ago. They had become something harder, something angrier, something far more dangerous. The age of human revenge had begun. The news of the attack on the Zirathi monitoring station spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The survivors who escaped in the rescue pods told their story to anyone who would listen. Humans were alive. They had ships. They had weapons that could punch through the best shields in the galaxy. And they were very, very angry. The Consortium Council met in emergency session on their great space station near the center of the galaxy. Representatives from 12 species sat around a circular table, their faces showing fear and confusion. For 300 years, they had believed that the human problem was solved. The violent species had been contained on their dying world. Left to face the consequences of their own nature, now they learned that their solution had failed completely. How is this possible? Demanded Speaker Valyan of the Altarian Republic. The tall, blue-skinned alien waved his forearms in agitation. Our senses showed no space activity from Earth for centuries. No ships, no signals, no signs of advanced technology. The humans learned to hide, replied General Kortvex of the Zirathi Military Command. His crystal skin had lost its usual glow, making him look older and more tired. They developed stealth technology based on our own displacement fields. Our monitoring stations never detected them because they did not want to be detected. The council chamber fell silent as the members realized what this meant. If humans could hide their ships so completely, how many other fleets might be out there? How many human warships were already moving toward consortium worlds? Admiral Marcus Reeves stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, studying a holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots marked every known consortium world, military base, and space station. Blue dots showed the positions of human fleets. Over the past 6 months, humanity had launched attacks on 17 different targets. Each attack had been perfectly planned and brutally executed. Marcus was older now, with gray hair and lines around his eyes, but his anger burned as hot as ever. He had been fighting this war for most of his adult life, and he would not stop until every species that had condemned humanity paid the price for their judgment. "Admiral," said Captain Rodriguez from the tactical station, "we are approaching the Zentari system. The homeworld of the species that destroyed our moon base 300 years ago. Marcus nodded grimly. The Zentari had been the ones too. Fire the killing shot that destroyed humanity's first permanent settlement beyond Earth. Their energy weapons had turned the small lunar colony into a crater of melted rock and metal. 300 human colonists had died in that attack, including children who had been born on the moon and had never seen their home planet. Now it was time for the Zentari to experience the same loss. Signal the fleet, Marcus ordered. Begin the orbital bombardment in 1 hour. I want every military installation on the planet reduced to rubble. But leave the cities alone. We are not going to kill civilians from space like cowards. This will be a ground invasion. The other officers on the bridge exchanged glances. A ground invasion was much more dangerous than an orbital bombardment. Human soldiers would have to land on the planet and fight the Zentari face to face. Many humans would die in such an attack, but Marcus had his reasons. He wanted the Zentari to suffer the same way humans had suffered. He wanted them to watch their world burn from the ground up. He wanted them to feel helpless and afraid as their civilization crumbled around them on the planet below. The Zentari capital city of Velandra was in chaos. The tall, elegant aliens ran through the streets in panic as human ships appeared in their sky. The Zentari had smooth, pale skin and large black eyes that could see in many different spectrums of light. They were a peaceful species by nature, more interested in art and philosophy than in warfare. That peaceful nature had not stopped them from condemning humanity. 3 centuries ago, President Cormalith of the Zentari Council stood in his office, high above the city, watching through his window as human dropships descended through the atmosphere. Each ship carried a full company of human soldiers, armed and armored for urban combat. Soon, those soldiers would be fighting in the streets of his beautiful city. "Sir," said his aide, a young Zentari named Telvares, "the human commander is requesting to speak with you." The president nodded and activated the communication system. The face that appeared on his screen was human, male, with short gray hair and cold eyes that seemed to look right through him. "I am Admiral Marcus Reeves of the Terran Fleet," the human said. "You have 1 hour to evacuate all civilians from your military districts. After that, my soldiers will begin their advance through your city. Any Zentari military personnel who resist will be killed. Any civilians who get in our way will be moved aside. But we will not deliberately target non-combatants." President Cormalith leaned forward toward the screen. "Admiral, please. There must be some way to resolve this peacefully. Our species made a mistake 300 years ago. We know that now, but surely we can negotiate some kind of settlement." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Negotiate? Your species had 300 years to negotiate. You could have sent ships to check on Earth. You could have offered aid to the survivors. You could have shown some small amount of mercy to the people you condemned to die. Instead, you did nothing. You watched from a distance and assumed we were extinct. We thought," the president began. "You thought wrong," Marcus interrupted. "You thought that humans would simply accept your judgment and die quietly on our poisoned world. You thought that a species capable of great violence could only destroy. You never considered that the same drive that made us capable of war could also make us capable of surviving anything you could do to us." The human admiral leaned closer to the camera. "Today you will learn what humans are truly capable of when we have a righteous cause. Your soldiers will fight bravely, I am sure, but they will lose. And when this battle is over, when your military is defeated and your government has surrendered, you will broadcast a message to every world in the consortium. You will tell them that humanity is no longer content to hide in the shadows. You will tell them that we are coming for all of them." The communication ended, leaving President Cormalith staring at a blank screen. Outside his window, he could see the first human soldiers landing in the city squares. They moved with grim efficiency, setting up defensive positions and preparing for the battle to come. The Zentari military tried to resist. Their soldiers were well trained and equipped with advanced energy weapons, but they had never fought an enemy like humanity. The humans fought with a brutality and determination that shocked the peaceful Zentari. When human soldiers were wounded, they kept fighting. When their equipment was damaged, they improvised new weapons from whatever materials they could find. When they were outnumbered, they used tactics that no civilized species would ever consider. General Maria Santos led the assault on the Zentari government district. She was a small, fierce woman with dark hair and scars from a dozen battles. As her soldiers advanced through the streets, she broadcast messages to the defending Zentari. "Forces, we are not here to conquer your world," she announced through loudspeakers mounted on human vehicles. "We are here to punish you for the crime you committed against our species. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue to resist, and you will share the fate of every other species that has stood against humanity." But the general's words were not entirely truthful. The humans were not following the traditional laws of war. They were fighting with the accumulated rage of 3 centuries. When Zentari soldiers tried to surrender, some human units accepted their surrender and took them prisoner. Others shot them down without mercy. Remembering the children who had died on the moon base, the battle for Velendra lasted for 3 weeks. Block by block, street by street, the humans advanced through the city. They used explosive charges to bring down buildings where Zentari soldiers had taken shelter. They employed chemical weapons to force defenders out of their bunkers. They showed no quarter to enemy forces that had caused significant human casualties. When the fighting finally ended, the beautiful Zentari capital was in ruins. Elegant spires that had stood for thousands of years lay broken in the streets. Parks and gardens were torn up by tank treads and artillery shells. The crystal pools that reflected sunlight throughout the city were filled with debris and the remains of destroyed vehicles. President Kormaleth stood in the ruins of his office, surrounded by human soldiers. His hands were bound behind his back, and his clothes were torn and dirty. Admiral Reeves stood in front of him, holding a recording device. "You will now deliver the message I promised," Marcus said. "You will tell the galaxy that the Zentari Republic has fallen to human forces. You will tell them that the species they condemned 300 years ago has returned to collect the debt they owe us. And you will tell them that this is only the beginning." The president looked around at the destruction of his city, at the faces of the grim human soldiers, at the recording device that would carry his words across the galaxy. He knew that he had no choice. His military was defeated. His government had fallen. His people were at the mercy of a species that had every reason to hate them. "I am President Kormaleth of the Zentari Republic," he said in a voice that shook with fear and exhaustion. "Our world has been conquered by human forces. The species we helped condemn 3 centuries ago has proven that our judgment was wrong. They have not died out as we believed. They have grown stronger, and now they seek revenge against all who wronged them." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "To all members of the consortium I say this: humanity is no longer the species we once knew. They have become something harder, something more dangerous. They are coming for all of us, and I do not believe that anything can stop them." The recording ended. Within hours, it would be broadcast to every populated world in the galaxy. The message would be clear to all who heard it. The age of the consortium was ending. The age of human dominance had begun. The final battle for the galaxy would take place at Consortium Prime, the artificial world that served as the seat of government for all 12 member species. It was a massive space station the size of a small moon, home to 50 million aliens from across the galaxy. For thousands of years, it had been the center of galactic civilization, a place where different species came together to make decisions about war and peace among the stars. Now it was about to become humanity's final target. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the flagship Prometheus, watching as the largest fleet in human history assembled around her. Over 200 warships had gathered for this assault, representing every underground city and secret shipyard that humanity had built during their centuries of exile. The ships stretched out in all directions, their black hulls almost invisible. Against the darkness of space, Elena was old now, in her 70s, but her mind was still sharp and her hatred still burned bright. She had spent her entire life working toward this moment. As a young scientist, she had helped crack the secrets of alien technology. As a middle-aged engineer, she had overseen the construction of humanity's first starships. Now, as an elderly admiral, she would lead the attack that would decide the fate of the galaxy. "Admiral," reported Captain Kim from the sensor station. "Long-range scans confirm the target. Consortium Prime is directly ahead, defended by the combined fleets of all 12 member species. I count over 800 alien warships in defensive positions around the station." Elena nodded calmly. The aliens outnumbered the human fleet by 4-1. Their ships were newer and more advanced. Their energy shields were stronger, their weapons more sophisticated. By every measure of military science, humanity should lose this battle decisively, but the aliens had forgotten something important about humans. They fought best when the odds were against them. On Consortium Prime, the Emergency Council was meeting for what everyone knew would be the last time. Representatives from the 12 species sat around their ancient table, but now the chamber was filled with fear instead of the usual diplomatic courtesy. Reports came in constantly from the outer sensor stations, human ships approaching, human fleets massing. The final assault was only hours away. "We should surrender," said Speaker Valyan of the Altarian Republic. His blue skin had turned pale with fear. "The humans have already conquered 17 of our worlds. Their technology is superior to ours. Their soldiers fight with a savagery that our people cannot match. Perhaps if we offer them tribute, they will spare what remains of our civilization." "Tribute?" General Kortvex of the Zerathi slammed his crystalline fist on the table. "We are the Consortium. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. We do not bow down to a species of violent primitives. Those violent primitives have been defeating us in every battle for the past 2 years," replied Ambassador Shelneth of the Vokari Trade Union. "Maybe it is time to admit that we made a mistake 300 years ago. Maybe we should have tried to help them instead of condemning them to die." The argument continued, but it no longer mattered. Outside the station, human ships were taking up attack positions. The time for debate and diplomacy had passed. Now there would be only war. Elena activated the galaxy-wide communication system that the humans had captured from previous battles. Her face appeared on screens across Consortium Prime and on every inhabited world within 50 light-years. Billions of aliens stopped what they were doing to listen to the words of the human commander. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Liberation Fleet," she began, her voice calm and steady. "For 300 years, your consortium has believed that you successfully eliminated the human threat to galactic peace. You watched our civilization fall and did nothing to help. You condemned us to die on our poisoned world because you judged us too violent, too dangerous to be allowed among the stars." The camera pulled back to show the bridge of the Prometheus, filled with battle-scarred humans who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. Each one wore the patch of the Terran Resistance, with its image of Earth surrounded by stars and the words "Never forget, never forgive." "But you made a critical error in your judgment," Elena continued. "You assumed that a species capable of great violence could only be destructive. You never considered that the same drive that made us capable of war could also make us capable of surviving anything you could do to us. You never imagined that we could turn our capacity for violence into a tool for justice." On Consortium Prime, the alien leaders watched in growing horror as human ships moved into final attack position. The defensive fleets were ready, their weapons charged and their shields at maximum power. But somehow, none of them felt confident about the coming battle. "You believed that leaving us to die slowly would teach us a lesson about the consequences of our nature," Elena said, her voice growing harder. "Instead, you taught us something much more dangerous. You taught us that the galaxy is ruled by beings who have no mercy for those they consider inferior. You taught us that peace and civilization are just words that the strong use to control the weak." The Admiral leaned forward toward the camera, her aged face showing the accumulated anger of centuries. Today, we will show you what humans are truly capable of when we have a righteous cause. Today, we will demonstrate that your judgment of our species was not just wrong, but catastrophically stupid. You created your own destroyers when you condemned us to that dying world. The human fleet began its attack without warning. Unlike the graceful energy weapons favored by most galactic civilizations, human ships fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds, kinetic weapons that hit with the force of small meteors, nuclear missiles that could crack the hull of the largest battleship, plasma torpedoes that burned through energy shields like they were made of paper. The alien defensive fleet tried to respond, but the humans had learned too much from their previous battles. They knew exactly how each species fought, what weapons they used, what tactics they preferred. The Zirathi liked to form defensive walls with their energy shields. The humans broke those walls with concentrated kinetic bombardments. The Altarians preferred to fight at long range with guided missiles. The humans closed to short range where their weapons were more effective. Admiral Torres commanded the left wing of the human fleet from his ship, the Retribution. He had fought in the battle for the Zentari homeworld, and his tactics had become legend among human forces. As his ship smashed through a formation of Valkyrie cruisers, he opened a communication channel to the enemy commander. "Your mistake was thinking that we would fight like civilized beings," he said. "Civilization is a luxury for species that have never been condemned to die by their betters. We learned to fight like cornered animals because that is what you made us." The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships rammed alien vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. Human pilots flew damaged fighters directly into enemy command bridges. Human soldiers boarded alien ships and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors, showing a level of viciousness that shocked their opponents. Slowly, inevitably, the alien defensive fleet began to collapse. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were reduced to floating wreckage. Crews that had never faced a truly desperate enemy were overwhelmed by human forces that fought with the fury of the truly wronged. Elena watched from the bridge of the Prometheus as the last alien battleship exploded in a flash of nuclear fire. Around Consortium Prime, the space was filled with debris and the glowing hulks of destroyed vessels. The greatest military force in galactic history had been defeated by the species they had once condemned as too violent to live among the stars. "Signal all ships," Elena ordered. "Prepare for the final assault on the station. No one gets to leave, no one gets to escape. Today, the age of the Consortium ends forever." The human fleet moved toward Consortium Prime like a swarm of angry metal wasps. On the station, millions of aliens huddled in their homes and offices, knowing that their civilization was about to end. Some tried to flee in escape pods, but human fighters intercepted them and forced them back. Others tried to send surrender messages, but the humans were no longer interested in surrender. Elena opened one final communication to the doomed station. 300 years ago, you sat in judgment of humanity and found us wanting. You decided that we were too dangerous to be allowed to spread to other worlds. You condemned us to die on our poisoned planet and thought that was the end of the matter. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. These were the descendants of the survivors, the children and grandchildren of people who had refused to die quietly when the aliens condemned them. They had spent their entire lives working toward this moment of revenge. "But we did not die as you expected," Elena continued. "We grew stronger, we learned, we adapted. And most importantly, we remembered. We remembered every insult, every moment of suffering, every life lost because of your arrogance. Today we collect payment for that debt." The human ships opened fire on Consortium Prime itself. The artificial world's shields held for a few minutes, but human weapons had been designed specifically to break through the strongest defenses in the galaxy. When the shields finally collapsed, kinetic projectiles began to rain down on the surface, like a metal meteor storm. But the humans did not try to destroy the station completely. They wanted prisoners, they wanted witnesses, they wanted the galaxy to know exactly what had happened here. And why? As human soldiers began landing on the station's surface, Elena delivered her final message to the galaxy. The consortium that ruled you for 10,000 years no longer exists. The species that condemned humanity to die have learned the consequences of their judgment. From this day forward, the galaxy will be ruled by those who understand that mercy is earned, not given freely. She looked directly into the camera, her old eyes burning with the fire that had sustained humanity through 3 centuries of exile and revenge. You watched us fall when our world was dying. You did nothing to help when we begged for mercy. Now you will live under our rule, and you will learn what it means to be judged by those who have never forgotten what injustice feels. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy on 1,000 different worlds, alien civilizations realized that their age of dominance was over. The species they had condemned as too violent for the stars had proven that violence, properly directed, could conquer anything. Humanity had risen from the ashes of their poisoned world, and now they ruled the galaxy with the same ruthless efficiency. They had once used to survive in the underground cities of Earth. The aliens had wanted to teach them a lesson about the consequences of violence. Instead, they had created the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. The age of human dominance had begun.